Baptisms have become rare in Tur Abdin, the Mount of the Servants of God. Here in southeastern Turkey, close to the Syrian border, stands one of the oldest monasteries in the world, Mor Gabriel. Abbot Timotheus Samuel Aktaş himself baptizes the new Christian. Like the monastery, the little boy is named after the Archangel Gabriel. There have been Arameans living in Tur Abdin for more than 3,000 years. It's a hilly region, some 150 kilometers long and 100 kilometers wide. Until the late Middle Ages, only Christians lived here. Now there are hardly any left. The people of Tur Abdin farm and raise livestock. They eke out an existence in this harsh landscape, where the earth is often dried out before the end of spring. Hasan Cave, on the banks of the Tigris, is the gateway to Tur Abdin. Romans, Greeks, Arabs, Artukids, Ayyubids, and Ottoman Turks have all held sway here. But for hundreds of years it maintained a large Christian population. Since the last Aramean family left the town a few years ago, however, there's not a single Christian left. And if the controversial Ilizu Dam project goes ahead, a large area will be flooded and many archaeological treasures lost. Arameans were among the first followers of Christ. Their descendants could once boast more than 80 monasteries and some 2,000 churches in Tur Abdin. The oldest dated back to the 2nd century. They believed that their church, the Syriac Orthodox, was established by the apostles Thomas and Thaddeus in the first Christian century. Many of their churches have been abandoned. Most have fallen into ruins. Some were converted into mosques, their steeples turned into minarets. Modern Turkey is a country of diverse cultures, but it has little sensibility for its Christian heritage. Attempts to get the old monasteries and churches recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites have so far failed, because the Turkish government refuses to cooperate. And the Arameans are not allowed to conserve or restore the buildings themselves, because Ankara refuses to recognize them as a religious community. The Turkish authorities continue to deny the Armenian genocide during the First World War, in which hundreds of thousands of Arameans were also massacred. This is also a sensitive issue for Germany, which was allied with the Ottoman Empire during the war and was implicated in the pogroms. Many Arameans sought refuge in the mighty fortress church at Enwardo. Mirza Akbulut is now mayor of the village. Today, it's mainly inhabited by Kurds.
In 1915, which we call the Year of the Sword, many Christians took refuge here. The church was crowded to capacity. A pregnant woman from Irlis climbed in through this window and gave birth in the church 2 months later to a boy she called Fermano, which is Kurdish for genocide. You can still see bullet holes in the walls. Here's one. Where's the other? Here. And here's another one. The door used to be higher, as you can see, but during the persecutions, we walled it up for security reasons. Between 500 and 600 people sought refuge in the church. Others hid in the houses, and the defense posts ensured that nobody could enter our village. God alone knows if something like that could ever happen again. But look at Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. There are terrible things happening there now, which is not the case here in Turkey. We're left in peace, but only God knows what will happen in the future. Anything is possible, but God is our shield.
The guards on the roofs have been replaced by security cameras. Times change. But the Turkish government still forbids the teaching of Aramaic in schools. In spite of this, Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke, is taught every day in Midyat. It may be illegal, but Ayhan Gürkan has been doing it for more than 25 years.
We Arameans are scattered throughout the world. Our children who have grown up in Germany, Holland, or the United States, or those in Syria, even they can't speak any Aramaic. How are they to communicate? If I were to meet my uncle's son or my sister's son tomorrow, how would we understand each other? One speaks English, another Dutch and Flemish, a third Arabic, and I speak Turkish. We should be able to communicate in Aramaic.
The vernacular of the Arameans is Turoyo, an Aramaic dialect that is only spoken, not written. The original Aramaic language is mainly used in the liturgy. When Jesus spoke it, Aramaic was already 1,000 years old and known throughout the Middle East, as far as the Indus Valley. With the spread of Islam, this biblical language was gradually suppressed and almost died out. Aramean children today grow up speaking various languages and dialects. At school, they are taught in Turkish. They speak Kurdish or Arabic to their neighbors. But at home, they speak Aramaic. Simon Atalay lived in Germany for many years. He fled there with his parents. 12 years ago, he returned to Tur Abdin. 4 years later, he married Sarah. Their daughters, Melissa, Linda, and Talita, were all born here in Midyat, the largest town in Tur Abdin. The Atalays like living here, but as members of a Christian minority in a country that is now predominantly Muslim, their life is sometimes hard. 50 years ago, 90% of Midyat residents were Aramean. Today, there are only a few left in the town, which has a population of 55,000. Many of their Kurdish neighbors view them as infidels.
They call us people without faith. They say we have no faith. You can ask anywhere in Turkey whether any Arameans, Syriac Orthodox Christians, are policemen, judges or lawyers. They can't be. They don't accept us here.
And yet, although parts of Tur Abdin are viewed as Kurdish terrorist strongholds, the Aramean situation has improved considerably. Just 10 years ago, attacks, kidnappings, and murders were commonplace here. For decades, the Turkish army fought groups of Kurdish rebels in the area. The Arameans were dragged into the conflict until most of the Christians fled from the Mount of the Servants of God. 40 years ago, there were more than 200,000 Syriac Orthodox Christians in Tur Abdin. Now there are scarcely 2,000. Many emigrated to Europe. More than 100,000 Arameans now live in Germany alone. Few have returned to Tur Abdin. One who did is Israel Demir. In 2006, he courageously returned here with his family. He can well remember the chaos, being caught between the two sides.
Arameans didn't know what to do. If they didn't cooperate, the rebels threatened and killed them. And if they supported the rebels, they got into trouble with the government. So many people were forced to leave their homeland.
The last Arameans fled from Israel's hometown, Kafro, in 1995. Abandoned, the town fell into disrepair. 10 years later, a settlement for returnees was built beside the ruins of the old village. 14 families now live here. But some of the new houses in Kafro are just holiday homes. Their owners are resident abroad, where life is a lot easier. Young Arameans in particular are dissatisfied with the educational and leisure opportunities in Kafro. For Israel, however, it's important that his children grow up in Tur Abdin.
When I was in Germany, my children spoke to each other in German. In 20 or 25 years, they'll have children of their own, and those children would only speak German. I saw that very clearly. Many young Arameans there stopped going to church. They thought it was boring because they didn't understand Aramaic. Some of them preferred to go to Catholic Mass because that was held in German. I think that the Aramean minority, outside its homeland between the Tigris and Euphrates, is in danger of losing its language and culture in the next 2 or 3 generations.
Diese Sprache, diese Kultur nicht mehr bestehen wird.
Our Church of St. Jacob is about 1,500 years old. It was looted several times. This is the baptismal font where I was baptized.
45 years after Israel was baptized, the church is now a listed building. That means the Arameans are not allowed to restore it. Unfortunately, the authorities have made no effort to do so either. So the Arameans can only look on helplessly as their church continues to crumble.
Also wo unsere Dorf circa 10-11 Jahre leer war,
When our village was abandoned for 10 or 12 years, the so-called village guards and Turkish soldiers painted graffiti on the church. The altar was also destroyed. As you can see, there are bullet holes in the sanctuary. There's a lot to restore. Only the walls are still intact.
The Christian community of Antioch, out of which the Syriac Orthodox Church grew, was the first Christian community outside of Jerusalem. It was established in 34 AD. Mor Gabriel is the oldest monastery in the world continually in use. It was founded in 397. It has always been the religious center of Tur Abdin and is viewed as a second Jerusalem by the Church of the East. In the 5th century, the great theologian Philoxenos of Marburg wrote, "Anyone who visits the monastery which the angel founded with respect and awe acquires the same merit as if he had visited Jerusalem." The monastery is now facing its greatest challenge. The neighboring Kurdish villages have brought charges against the monks for what they call illegal settlement, and the court has awarded them part of the monastery lands. The High Court in Ankara has also ruled against the monks in a second case, so that they have also lost the fields and the gardens adjacent to the monastery. Even the monastery wall is due to be pulled down. The chairman of the monastery foundation, Kyriakos Ergun, has been indicted for illegal appropriation of others' property. The allegation that the monastery was built on the foundations of a mosque is absurd, since it was built 200 years before the birth of Muhammad. After numerous protests by European politicians and diplomats, that argument, at least, has been dropped.
The wall is vital to the monastery. If it is torn down, the future of the people who live in the monastery can no longer be guaranteed. For us Arameans, Mor Gabriel is indispensable. It draws Arameans from all over the world. If one day this monastery no longer exists, our small minority in Turkey will also disappear and cease to exist.
The shortage of priests is also a problem. Turkey does not allow the church to train new clergy. The issue is complex. The government doesn't allow Muslim communities to train their own clergy either. It has been suggested that Orthodox priests could be trained at government-run Islamic theological colleges, but that is unacceptable to the Arameans. Returnees are their only hope. Jochen Unfan was born in Tur Abdin. As a child, he emigrated with his family to Holland and studied Orthodox theology in Damascus. He has come to live as a monk in Mor Agin, an abandoned monastery near the Syrian border. Mor Agin was built on a steep slope of the Islo Mountains. It was founded in 363 AD, so it's even older than Mor Gabriel. For centuries, it was an important spiritual center. In its heyday, 350 monks lived here. But when the last monk died in 1970, the abbey fell into disrepair. The reopening of Moragin is a major event in Tur Abdin. More than 300 Christians undertook the arduous journey to reach this isolated monastery and join in the celebrations. The monastery is named after Saint Agin, who lived in Egypt in the 4th century, worked as a pearl diver, and used his earnings to help the poor. Later, he came to Tur Abdin and established a number of monasteries here. The reopening of Moragin is an important symbol for the entire Syriac Orthodox Church, and for Turkish Arameans in particular. It expresses their determination not to abandon Tur Abdin. The Mount of the Servants of God is their home and spiritual center.
O Holy Father, O Patriarch, we beg your holiness, bestow your grace upon us, and fulfill what this monk desired and intends to take upon his shoulders. We ask you to bless him and grant your disciple Yokun Unfal to come here.
The new resident of Moragin is optimistic.
No one has prayed here for 40 years. The monastery was abandoned. I hope now that it has reopened, the faithful will come here and pray with me, taking with them the blessings of the monastery for themselves and their families.
Neither Islam, nor genocide, nor civil war has been able to drive the Arameans completely from their home, Tur Abdin. But today they are just a tiny minority in a country that is predominantly Muslim. Most of the Arameans have emigrated to Europe or to the United States. There they have put down roots, and few of them think of returning to the Mount of the Servants of God. Quietly and almost unnoticed, a great culture and a biblical language are dying out. When the celebrations were over, silence descended on Moragin. Brother Yokun had an appointment with God.
نفقا